Welcome to the Lightforge. This is Outwicta.
Hey guys, this is Merps, and today we have a very special guest. Why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Simcopter1, and I do interactive and methodical arenas on Twitch, doing the Infinity Arena thing 6 nights a week, sometimes doing day streams as well.
Yeah, so we have Simcopter with us. For those of you who are very in tune with the Hearthstone arena community, you have probably heard of Simcopter. He is an Infinite Arena player as well. And if you watch our streams typically, this past Thursday, we did a very fun co-op with Sim, and the last run, the Hunter run, went 12 wins, and it was just a really good time.
That was a
Yeah.
really fun run. That was like super like late game Hunter where we got some weird cards and it ended up being like Savannah High mains and a bunch of like really awesome big cards. We were playing like kind of mid rangey, kind of slow. We won on card advantage way more times than I think you typically do as a hunter.
It was like about holding the board, getting your Alex out, and drawing cards, and just holding the line until we got to like Ball of Spiders and Savannah High mains, Sea Giant. Just it, I think, really played in a control style that worked and presented threats on the board that our opponent had to deal with.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting way to play Hunter, and we talked about Hunters, the class, in past past podcasts. But is that kind of the way that you play Hunter?
No, not at all. This was a totally an experiment. I think like an experiment that worked. I've been curious how Control Hunter like would go in Arena. Or at least that's the way I'm kind of presenting it, right? Control Hunter.
Yeah,
I mean, it could be mid range, but
It's really just like a slow mid range hunter.
it was like a 15 to 20 turn deck, like almost every single game. It was crazy. So I'm really glad that we experimented and tried something new. I think that's something that is a big part of TGT is getting outside your comfort zone, right? That's the only way you can expand it. Getting outside your comfort zone and trying something new, trying something different. That's how you innovate. That's how you stumble across something new. And I think we did something there.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And one thing I did also want to touch upon was you told me before that it was kind of not your first time doing co-op, but you haven't had a lot of experience with co-ops. And
Yeah.
you know me and Advocta, we we have built our entire like Hearthstone kind of career on doing co-ops. How do you feel about that?
I honestly, I think you do arenas better when you co-op. It's because it's not just you and your brain working there. I mean, you have multiple brains going at once. You can counteract each other with real logic in real time. Like
Real
no,
logic.
Yeah, like you're not just like lying to yourself. Like, I guess it's totally gonna work. I can win in 2 turns. Like when you have somebody there to be like, no, you can't do that. That's not the way this deck wins. You accelerate your learning when you're playing with others and you're really present and you're there together. And even with 3 people, I thought maybe it would be a little bit messy or something like that. I thought it was 3 times more efficient than instead just 2 times more efficient. I really, really enjoyed it. It was excellent.
Yeah,
Awesome.
that's wonderful. That's kind of like what we why we started really liking to do co-op arenas because we're all like all really good players, and then you play, and then you eventually start talking to people about a play, and you can't quite put down like what exactly the board state is, what the 5 turns before that were, what your reads are, and now you have it all kind of right there. So
It helps you develop that more comprehensive understanding of what's going on, not just in the play, but about the deck. To have a successful experience in a Hearthstone arena, you need to know your deck before you even go into game one. You got to know it cold. And having somebody else there to help you, even just with that, and you both are just as invested in the deck, you're both as attached to it. It's not just somebody guiding you, you both have that equal investment. And whenever I feel down, whenever I feel like I just cannot quite get back to where I was, I like to duo. I'll duo with Shady, I'll duo with MNC Epiphany, and now I want to duo with Edwocta and Merps. They're excellent, and you guys are just very lucky to be a part of this program because they do a damn good job. And it's gonna be a hard. You're gonna have a hard time finding better programs than this on the Hearthstone Twitch.
I mean, let's just face it, it's also just fun to play with other people, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you perform better with games in life if you are having fun, right? That's a motivator. You're much more likely to succeed if you're having a good time. So,
Yep. Well,
especially with
Sim,
friends.
I hope you had a great time with us. I hope you're going to have a good time today. And before we get into the really meaty stuff, I want to take this back to the beginning, and I want to ask you, how'd you get into Hearthstone?
So Hearthstone to me was I had recently gotten back from Europe. My fiance and I were on a trip, and my buddies brought this game to my attention called Hearthstone, Heroes of Warcraft. It's just coming out by Blizzard, and they're like, it's like Magic but World of Warcraft. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Are you serious? Like, I never understood Magic. People they would always explain it to me like, oh no, just tap this way, turn around like this. Oh no, you're doing it wrong. No, you take this spell. No, don't do that.
You gotta put it on the stack the right way.
I don't want to play this now. I really like, it was very convoluted and complex, and I never really had a good teacher. It's like, I just don't want to play it. And then here comes along a game that's supposed to be, a more simple version, maybe a little bit lighter, a little bit easier to understand within the universe that I already love, the Warcraft universe. Oh, it's a home run. Are you kidding me? I have all the incentives to learn this game. And as soon as I started playing the game, I started showing others how to play the game because I was just as enthused about it as everybody else. They're like, you should go on Twitch and try this out. Like, oh, is that like owned? Like, yeah, it isn't around anymore. So, like, okay, this is gonna be a totally
different generation.
The game, the media, it's just sure, why not? What would I have to lose? And that was my first game. It's still my primary game, and nothing has been the same ever since. It's been just as fun as it was from day one. It's just new every day. Arena's always been my baby. I went into that game knowing like, I don't know if Constructed is going to work out for me. It's the same. It's the grind, right? The Constructed is the grind I was trying to get away from. And Arena is new and fresh every single time. You can erase your memory if you need to. You can have that new experience. It's like life. It's day after day. It's something different and new. So
yeah, you just roll it again if bad things happen, and if good things happen, well, now you have that experience, and that's a unique experience. No one is going to have that same run that you did.
It's this memory we share, just like this hunter deck, just like the warrior deck. I mean, it's and we were all there for it, and it was fun and it was memorable. And you can have that experience with Constructed, but does it kind of fold in with the rest of your memories of that deck? Yeah, probably.
Well, I mean, my 13th patron warrior that I face is not the same as my 213th one that I took down. It's just totally different experience.
At what turn do they drop the Berserker? Is it turn 9 or is it turn 11? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's a different game for that reason. Like you said, I do think it's more like Constructed is more of a grind. When I was grinding up the ladder to get that legend card back that I really wanted, so that's what I was doing. And the entire time I was like, I had a lot of fun constructing my deck, tweaking my deck, figuring out exactly how my matchup works against other matchups. But it's not quite as flexible as the Arena. And to the credit of Constructed, that means it's tighter than Arena. That means that you really have to be on point, and there's less of a chance to kind of fix your mistakes like Arena oftentimes gives you.
Right. And there are certain cards in Constructed that are tethered to countering other cards, like your control warrior against, a paladin. If they have, they're going to have a Tyrion in their deck, they're going to have one. So you got to save a Hex, or you got to save an Earthshock at the very least. If you don't, you lose. So you have, these cards that are in your deck that are tethered to other cards that are in your opponent's deck, and you have to use them at the right time. It's just a different play style. And, I went Legend as well. I finished the rank 383, got my card back, had a lot of fun, cried, got a YouTube video about it. And that was my memory. And it was a great memory. But do I want to go back and play more Constructed? No, not really. Maybe a little bit, but not. I've done it. I can have that same like mini memory every single time with Arena, and it's so beautiful.
So, Simcopter, your description of the Arena is probably the best, most vibrant description of the Arena I've ever heard. And if I were just someone getting into the game, I would be like, this sounds amazing. This must be the best game ever. But as we know, Constructed is still, the more dominant play style of Hearthstone. So why do you think more people don't play Arena?
Well, I don't think people always know what they want until they try it. I think it's one of those things where people are familiar with Constructed because it's the kind of play style that is prevalent in other games. It's prevalent in chess. It has that very linear kind of I don't know. It's a linear play style that can go in from day to day to day to day, and you can lose one and it's not a problem. You can win one and get ahead. But I also think that's another part of it is that you can lose a game in Constructed and always get it back, no problem. In Arena, as you learn the game and you want to get better, there is a higher there is a higher pressure to succeed, because if you do make one mistake, that is the difference between maybe somebody who gets 8 wins or 7 wins or 11 wins or, maybe even 6 wins. That's how much one mistake can cost you. And that pressure that the mode applies on you to be as perfect as you possibly can is sometimes a little bit too much for a lot of people to take, and you don't always feel that until you jump in. But yeah, so a couple things. Constructed is already the play mode that is more most people already have an experience with, and that's their comfort zone. And arena is just kind of more of a pressure cooker environment.
I think that's a very good description. And other people have brought this up as well. You see it where people say they reached 7 wins, 8 wins, and they feel nervous to go on, right? They feel nervous. They don't want to continue on because what if I lose right now? I want to go 12, but it does put a lot of pressure on you, definitely.
And I think the good way to go about that is it is kind of like life, right? That never stops. No matter how far you go, that, human spirit it took to get you there, it doesn't just stop there. It doesn't just stop at 7 wins and you say, I'm done. It doesn't just stop at 9 wins, I'm done. You keep going further. And the way you can just guard yourself and be okay with it is like, okay, that was my personal best. But it doesn't stop there. You always continue to push forward. And that's what Arena can do for you.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of pushing forward, we have Blizzard pushing forward with TGT, the newest expansion. I want to ask you about your opinions of TGT. Like, how have you been performing? Because you've always been a very good player, infinite player. And how have you been performing in this expansion?
I think, just starting off from vanilla merps, I was not always, this is like my first, and you're very, very kind. But, I started off just like everybody else playing this game. I didn't have magic behind me. I didn't have that, skeleton. I had to build from the very beginning. And the big, the push behind me, the people that really helped me was Twitch chat. It was, Jessica, my fiance, it was my friends, but it was the community that helped me get better at this game, and I helped them get better too. And we learned from each other's mistakes. So it's been a very, it's been a linear rise in terms of win rate, and TGT did give me a huge bump. I got up to like a 70, almost like a 76% win rate. Wow. So, hanging out with you guys, hanging out with Ratsma, hanging out with Crip, Trump, and, everybody's high times, Hafu as well. And then after a couple weeks, I started to slide a little bit. And at first I took it really hard. I actually lost sleep over it. Just like, am I really meant to be here? Like, I'm an Infinity player, but like, am I really that high up? And it's like, okay, this is the fight you have every time you go, you have a step forward. You take a step back too. And it's about comprehensively understanding why you're succeeding and why you're failing. And that's when I started to slide a little bit, started getting to about 72% win rate. I was like, I need help. Something's going wrong here. And I'm somebody who does not like to put any of my losses on variance. I don't like to put any of my losses on RNG. I put it all on myself, and I put a lot of pressure on myself to succeed. That can create this
I think that's something that almost all good players feel, that they know variance exists. They know that probably some of it or most of it is probably due to variance, but you don't take it as variance, or else it stops your improvement.
You got to own it. You gotta own it, but it's also you gotta be nice to yourself. You gotta give yourself a break and know when variance is variance. And I think at some point I did put a little bit too much pressure on myself. I did start to misplay. I started changing some of my fundamentals, thinking that I was compensating for things that maybe didn't exist, things I didn't have control over.
Going away from what got you there.
Exactly. And I realized, especially within this last week or two, no, I'm meant to be there. I'm meant to be that 72, 76%, win rate with all these other guys. It's just, I gotta stay cool, collected, make sure my fundamentals are strong always, because as soon as you take your eye off the ball with that kind of stuff, when to hit with your weapon, how much damage can you take, how much can you use your health as a resource, how often can I tap? You have to constantly make sure you understand those fundamentals, because you can lose them at any time if you freak out, or you push yourself too hard, or maybe you just didn't understand it that well in the first place. But that's a part of the learning process, and that'll always be with you.
And it's even worse when it's on stream, right? Where you're trying to recover, you're trying to look inwards and just trying to collect yourself, but everything is aired out to the public, and it's good in a way where people can see you sort of struggling through this, because at any given moment, everyone's going to have their bad days, everyone's going to have their bad weeks, and I think it's very inspirational in a way, seeing good players go through this.
It's a way to relate. It's one of those things where we're not just those people that are better than everybody else at the game. We're just like you, and we're always learning. We
How you know that you may not be just like people when you have to tell people you are just like people?
no, I mean, but
Love
I
it.
mean, like, it's I think sometimes we are put on that pedestal that the whole reason this person is here because they're better than all of us at this
Yeah.
game, and that's not completely true. We're just there because we love the game and because of our passion. We happen to be pretty good at it,
Yeah.
but like that's a cycle that also allows chat to get better, the community to get better, we get better. It's this positive feedback loop.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I think that's why like this game is so big on Twitch and it's so eminently watchable because on any play, I don't care how good of a player you are, you have made a worse play than the general Twitch chat, and Twitch chat will let you know immediately, and you look at it
and
and you
it
go,
makes them feel
"Oh,
better.
that's
It makes them
right."
feel better. Like, oh, it's not just
Oh.
Superman. It's one of us. It's one of us.
I think Adukta brings up a really good point. And talking about Twitch chat, the one thing I've noticed is in your channel and in your chat in particular, it's a little bit different. The vibe is a little bit different than the chat that you see with bigger streamers.
Sure.
Is this something that you've tried to cultivate? Do you think it's just a byproduct of what you bring to the table?
It is absolutely something we've been trying to cultivate. It was one of the main reasons why I started streaming. It was one of those things where I wanted to find a purpose with the stream. I wanted to find why do people want to be here? Why do people want to hang out with me? Why do people want to hang out with each other? Why am I doing this? And it's one of those things where I went through the Hearthstone Twitch and I didn't exactly like what I was seeing on a lot of the channels in terms of just spammerino, hide behind the kappa, and I'm okay with a little bit, of the dongers and the, kappas, and that's cool, man. But like that real good conversation that you get in real life when you're connecting to somebody, I wanted that there, and I wanted that there all the time. And because that's the way I operate. I'm a very one-on-one person. I like deep conversation. I even like to talk about other things in Hearthstone, believe it or not. Have some drinks, talk about games, life. Why are we here? We're spending these valuable heartbeats with each other. Why not make the best of it? So it's one of those things where we talk about the game, but we're also there for each other. And if someone is having a down day, you're gonna be able to trust the people that are in chat, and they're gonna be able to help you a little bit. Nobody there is probably a trained psychologist, but we're all each other's friends, and that's something that's really special on our channel.
Yeah, guys, you heard it. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, when I first figured out what Twitch was, I was like, oh, this is like a thing. And then I looked into a chat and I thought, I have no idea what is going on here. People seem to be saying weird messages that have nothing to do with what is going on. And the streamer
Which
is
seems
not
off topic.
reacting to it. Yeah, this all seems really weird. And there are these weird faces that come up that don't seem to mean anything, but people are using them a lot. And it's that's like a Twitch culture, and some of it is very good, and some of it is spammy, and other parts of it is spammy but good. But there's it's good that there's different things available on Twitch because the platform is it's so open. It lets you do anything you want. It lets you build any kind of community that you want. So
That's the
I thought
whole-
that it was. Yeah, I thought that it was really like when I found your stream for the first time. I thought it was really awesome that you built this community up that was very much founded upon this idea that no, we're not going to do all this Twitch stuff that is either irrelevant or sometimes toxic
Sure.
or just things that may turn like an average viewer like that you meet on the street off from going on Twitch. Right? They come in. It's this
Right.
kind of hostile, weird environment, and it doesn't have to be like that. It could just be people hanging out, sharing this gaming experience.
Absolutely. I noticed a lot of the conversations I had with fellow community members at TwitchCon were just like the same conversations we had in chat, just face to face. The same words, the same context, the same, well, anyways, it's basically one of those things on Twitch where the whole platform is designed around community first, and how far you want to you want to take it, and any way you do it is fine, and there's always going to be a community for you on Twitch. But I feel like sometimes that is lost, where it's just about the game, it's just about being an enthusiast about the game, nothing matters more than the game, everything else is fluff. And it's like, wait, that's not why we're here, man. We're here because we all have something in common, this passion we have for the game, and we're all, like I said, just sharing these really, really valuable heartbeats with each other. Why not just share them together rather than get mean at each other and treat each other, like garbage. It can be so much more than that.
Yeah.
I think more variety is also just good. You have some channels
Yeah.
that do one thing, other channels that do another thing. It's just good for Twitch, good for the general Twitch community to have channels that offer something different flavors.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's something
It
that
doesn't need to be homogenous.
Right, right. And it's something that if you get too big, like if you're like a Trump or a Crip or an Amaz, you don't have that option. There's no way you can control your chat to the like 20,000 people typing in your chat in the same way that someone with a slightly smaller average concurrent viewers will be able to do. So I think it puts people in certain advantages and other positions. So before we actually move on,
I don't think we've seen that yet. I bet
you think it's possible?
Start to see larger channels where things get more cultivated towards less spam, more openness.
Oh, that would be awesome.
I think because Twitch is still it's still so small right now. This is a media revolution that's happening before our eyes. This is infancy. This is fetal.
Yep.
It's gonna get bigger. Chat rooms are gonna get larger. This is only the beginning. So I think with time you'll see, and as people have more demand for that kind of community, more demand for that kind of content, it will come.
All right. Well, I hope what you say is true, and I'm waiting for it. We've been having our own like moderating like trials as we start hitting some higher concurrent viewer numbers, and it's been tough, but we're getting better at it. So hopefully this can continue. And before we move on so we're going to, this was all the nice, fluffy, feel good. Let's talk about the arena. Let's talk about Twitch. Let's see how we all got here. But let's get to some hard hitting questions about the arena and how it's played.
Okay.
Like you said, your record rocketed up between BRM and TGT, and I think a lot of people, their records either, we've talked to a lot of people, whether they're streamers or not streamers, just on Reddit. Some people's records have tanked, some people's records have gotten better, but I think you are, and just to put things in context, going from like 70% win rate to like 74, 75, 76% win rate is so much like magnitudes harder than going from like 60 to 65, let's say.
Oh yeah.
Just because
it's not even close.
And if you haven't done it, you may be thinking, well, it's just like, an extra win here or there. I just have to pick up that extra win. But the RNG and the matchups and everything starts, the games that you have to lose because you could never have done anything otherwise and no one could have, start weighing more and more as you go up, which is why you see a lot of like the top players kind of all top out at somewhere in the like 73 to 75 kind of range. So you made that jump when TGT happened. So what was your secret? Tell us the one clever trick that this man used to beat the TGT meta.
Okay, so what happened was in BRM, I was forced to be a much faster player than I originally was. My roots are like mid-range value turned into mid-range tempo. And as I started playing with other players, trying to really develop an understanding of BRM, it went pure tempo. Aggro, mid-range, you're always doing this race, and you're trying to win the game before your opponent can, catch up to you on card advantage and whatnot. And I had to learn that from a place that I didn't have. Like, that was all new skills. But my roots have always been this mid-range value tempo style. And I knew going into TGT, just by the effect of Inspire, that the meta would slow down, or the meta would slow down in a meaningful way. And it would mean that even with these larger cards that came out, I just saw, Kraken and Jormonger and Fearsome Doomguard. Like, these are cards that, although, well, Kraken's great, but I mean, like, these are good late game cards that can allow Inspire to be your engine, to use your hero power to slow down the game in your favor in a meaningful way. And I understood that going into it. And I was curious about playing Paladin. I was curious about playing Mage again. I stumbled across Lorinda, who streams on Twitch. He has been a Mage player from the very beginning, and he learned very quickly that, there's this like control play style of Mage, or like a control value play style of Mage that doesn't rely around AoE, that it's focused on the hero power, it's focused
Yep.
on Inspire. I learned that very quickly. It was just this capitalization upon some fundamentals I knew were going to happen on day one.
So it's kind of easy to see how you got this win rate, just because you were an early adopter, right? You recognized this this change in the meta, and I wouldn't say exploit, but you were able to take advantage of this knowledge that some other people might not have had, even a lot of Infinite players. And by you not only recognizing it early, but recognizing how to play in this way early, so you took advantage of that. And then especially if you wanted to play this control mage, kind of control paladin style, which is very, very powerful right now.
Oh, I totally agree about control mage not using AoE and using hero power. That's how I play control mage. Hugely, I like flame strike, but that's saying I like flame strike, whereas everyone else playing mage is like, oh my god, I see a flame strike, this is so amazing, my deck is made. So I think that's a very different mentality when it comes down to play control mage, and I agree. It's a very powerful way to play control, because that hero power is broken in the arena. When it comes to just relative to other hero powers.
Definitely, I think another big driver was just really just communicating with others. I don't think I completely appreciated Inspire until I talked to Brian Kibler at PAX, and we were just having a beer, and we were just eating, and I was asking him well, what do you think? What do you think about Joust and Inspire? And he was just, he was essentially elaborating upon something I'd already known with Inspire, that it allows you to, Inspire allows your hero power to be an engine for your late game, creating almost like card draw and card advantage.
It's infinite card advantage.
Exactly. And that jousting is not a mechanic that's very good for Arena, because you're never going to be able to meaningfully, allow Joust to, help you more than 50% of the time. Maybe it's even going to be hard to get it up to 45%. So screw the Joust. It's all about Inspire. And having that premonition going in, talking to other people about it, and then talking to somebody who's, about card design. It's Brian Kibler. He's a god of Hearthstone. Just knowing that you're already going in the right places gives you a lot of confidence too. So it's about, networking, studying the game, talking to the right people, and verify. Are you actually right? And if you're not, that's okay. You're not going to be right a lot of the time, but being able to collaborate again and find out where you're going wrong is going to help you get over those speed bumps a lot faster.
It's fantastic stuff. So I think that transitions well into the next question I definitely want to ask. You've already provided lots of good advice and good tips, but if you had to give one tip to your average intermediate level Hearthstone player who's looking to improve their arena game, what would it be?
Watch a lot of streams. And when I say watch a lot of streams, I mean watch different people. Watch them often. Put everything else down. Don't, maybe you have something going on the other monitor. Just put it down. You got music playing in the background, turn it off. Study this broadcaster. Study what they're playing. Why are they playing these cards? Why are they playing this cast? This class? What makes them tick? Study this person. Critique them. Criticize them. You don't have to say it in chat all the time or anything like that, but you can be critical of the person's plays. Maybe you're watching their VOD. When they're making a play, ask yourself, okay, they're going to make up this play right now. I think, and you pause the VOD, I think they're going to go this way about it because it'll achieve X, Y, and Z. See if they do it. If it's not that, are they wrong, or do they know something more than you? Study it like a book. Also, I recommend checking out competitive HS, which is a subreddit. And also there is an arena subreddit. Isn't that right?
Yeah, there's Arena HS as a subreddit. Hearth Arena has its own subreddit. The Arena HS has just general arena content. With Hearth Arena, you kind of want to link it somehow to Hearth Arena. It's mostly draft focused, or at least provides your deck on Hearth Arena. But generally, the idea is the same. They're both arena related subreddits that you can put questions out there. You can just generally read it for discussion to keep yourself thinking about how things are happening in the arena.
Absolutely.
I read pretty much every topic on those subreddits at some point. Maybe not the day it comes out, but I'll go back and look at everything.
Absolutely. Having a studious attitude about these things, and knowing that never stops. I'm always looking at the Hearth Arena tier list, asking myself, what does Hearth Arena think about this, and do I think they're right? Do I really think they're right? Especially on, contextual picks. Maybe there's a pick that is, I don't know, 6 points higher than another, but I know my deck really well. I know I need this card for curve, or I know I need this card for draw. It has to happen. And being able to contextualize the information there to apply it to your deck, it's something that will come with practice, but when you take that pick too, don't just be like, oh no, I feel like I might have made the wrong pick. I hate my deck now. No, just ask yourself, okay, it was either this card or this card. Now analyze the situation. We had one like that with Tinker's Sharpsword Oil in the first Rogue deck. What would have been better? We took a chance. Yeti or Tinker's Sharpsword Oil? Chat said Yeti. I think Yeti was the safe pick. Agreed. But why not Tinker's Sharpsword Oil? Let's see what it can do. We know Yeti could have been there. No problem. We have that information. But what can the oil do?
Yeah, I think it's just good to analyze and get a second opinion. And I think what you said is very appropriate. When you watch, don't just passively watch, right? When you consult something, don't just take it at face value. You want to go one level deeper. You want to do the necessary analysis. You want to keep on peeling back layer after layer to really get at the thought process, because it's not the result. It is the thought process, right?
It's that active watching. Like when I read a book that I really want to read, I write between the notes. I ask the author questions. I'll sometimes revisit those notes years later and ask myself why I was so dumb for asking those questions. No, just kidding. It is one of those things where you want to have that conversation internally, but also externally as well, and ask yourself why things are the way they are and how can I continue learning from that.
All right. So speaking of learning, that's what we try to do here on Deep Fried Meta, where we deep fry the meta. We didn't every single week. It doesn't get better, but this week on,
such a salesman, Merps.
I know, it's fantastic. But this week on Deep Fried Meta, we want to ask the question that keeps everyone up at night: how many North Sea Krakens is too many North Sea Krakens?
Before you answer this, it's not a joke. This is what keeps apparently a lot of people up at night. This is one of the top 3 questions that gets asked, like specifically about a particular card, ever since TGT came out. So this is on a lot of people's minds, actually.
Well, how many mind controls do you want in your deck?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect follow-up question. We've said this before. I've gone. I go with 2. I think 2 is okay. The first one's great. The second one's like, but doable.
So the thing is, I'd say if we're kind of to go about that tangent, if you're going to have 1 mind control in your deck, it's really good for it. The second one, I really like it in this slower meta. I think it really works. But if you have that second one in your opening hand, you probably lose. Now, the difference between mind control and Kraken is you can play Kraken 1 turn earlier, and it still affects the board in a way where you're not just, I don't know, say like mind controlling a Frostwolf Grunt or something, right? It's not that binary of a card. You can play that Kraken 1 turn early, affect the board, swing the board, and have a good minion out there. But I mean, like, how many turn 9s do you need? Knowing that on turn 10, if you play the Kraken, you still can't hero power unless you have a fencing coach or a Maiden of the Lake out there. 2 is good. After that, I think your deck has other needs.
Yeah, I think if you were to answer this question with one word, it would be, it depends, right? Depends.
Yep.
And then afterwards, you just dig. You keep on digging, and you guys touch upon some very good points. It depends on the rest of your deck. It depends on the class, right? And I think mind control is a pretty good comparison, but at the same time, Kraken, I think you can get away with more Krakens than mind control, not just the turn 9 versus turn 10. Mind control, I wouldn't say it's easy to play around when you're on the other side, but you can find ways, right? You can just drop, if you have a choice of dropping 3 small minions versus like 1 really large and 1 smaller, you go with the 3 small minions. And there's easier ways to play around that. And with the Kraken, immediate board impact, puts out a big body like mind control, but without the downsides. So yeah, I think simple answer is depends. And once again, you have to do that like very deep analysis of what is my deck capable of.
Yeah, I think if you look at the roles of mind control, right? Like we talked about this before. We had that control hunter, the like slow hunter deck, which goes to turn 15, turn 20 all the time.
Right.
It's a little weird for a hunter, but you play as a mage, you play as a priest, you play as one of the more control classes. That can happen pretty frequently if you build your deck to it, and no one bats an eye about it. They're just like, oh yeah, it's a control mage. And so if you have let's say, even if it's not turn 9 playable, even turn 10 playable, if you have 5 to 10 turns in the game to play this and have somewhat of an effect on the board, and it's a huge effect on the board because it's such a good card, that's
Absolutely.
a lot of turns, right? You don't want to get it.
Yeah, yeah.
So the problem is not that you don't get a chance to play these cards in a meaningful way. The problem is that these cards are unplayable for so long that if you get them in the beginning, you've added one more RNG element as to how you lose. Right. You're not coming back into the game if you start out with 2 mind controls in your hand.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. And you had your play, how good you were, had nothing to do with that loss. You just took the wrong cards came into your hand too early.
Absolutely. And when you have that heavy of cards in your hands, you are down those cards until you get there.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
you effectively, you do not have those cards, and you're relying on top decks. And when you're relying on top decks that early for the very next turn to find your very next card that you need to play, there is so much that can go wrong that your Krakens then, say you had 2 or 3,
it's not
those cards are just going to help. They're maybe going to help you come back, but are they really going to help you get ahead? You want them to help you get ahead, so maybe you don't want 3.
No, so I mean, I would actually I would take 4 or 5 Krakens if I don't have other big cards. I am very heavy, because I don't think that there's a difference between all those big cards, right? Because they're all good if you play them late and you get a chance to play them late, right? They're all good. Sure. They're all really, really good, or else it wouldn't even be in this conversation. And they're all really, really bad because they're completely unplayable cards if you get them early. So the difference is how easy is it to actually play these cards when you are at the late game stage. So a mind control, like you said, you're not going to mind control a Frostwolf Grunt. You're not really happy mind controlling a 3-drop. But you can crack in anything. You can crack in an empty board. You can crack in something small. You can crack in something big and then run something small that you have into it. So it's a much more flexible card, which within your, let's say, 5+1 for the 9 mana, like your 6 to 11 turns of the late game, these cards are going to get played. And so you're looking at a % chance of getting screwed by these cards being in your hand. And that % is not all that high, even if you have 5 of them. It ends up being, and the better of a player you are, obviously, the less you want to do this, because those cards in your hand is just going to screw you over, so you just take the loss, right? So if the higher your normal win percentage is, the worse that is for you. But depending on how good the rest of your deck is, that may be a worthwhile percentage to take, right? Like when you're putting your deck together, that's a risk. And the risk is, well, by adding too many large cards, I'm going to lose X% of the time, certainly. But maybe the other % of the times, it makes my deck so much better because, like, I need size. I'm not going to win any other way. I don't have win conditions. Or this is either a slow deck or a deck with a lot of reactive cards that doesn't quite have the card advantage yet. Just many situations can come into play where you win so much more with the extra Krakens in your deck than the % chance that you just definitely lose out. So
as a rebuttal to that, with the argument that these cards are going to win you so many games, and every once in a while it's going to cost you a game because you have so many of them, but it's outweighed by how many games you'll win.
Right.
I feel like we can immediately go to like Crip's conversation about Deathlord in one of his VODs, where he's talking about in Arena, you really can't have a card that maybe it wins you every 2 games but loses you 1. When you can only lose 3 games, do you really have that flexibility when maybe one of your losses is tethered to a bad draw, another one is tethered to RNG, and maybe your third, God forbid, loss is you made a little mistake. You made a boo-boo, or at least one more than your opponent, and you deserve to lose. Can you really have that like 4th loss that is, from the bad Anabar bounce back, or the Death Lord, or that extra mind controller Kraken?
I think it depends on how much you expect your deck to win in the first place, right? If you think this is a 40% win rate deck, then yes, you can, definitely. If you think this is a
That's a good
80% win rate deck, then no, you should not. So if your deck is going well, don't just stack Krakens on it. That's an extra loss condition, right? It looks like a great card, but it'll lose you games. But if your deck is kind of like okay-ish, or like, underwhelming even, then I think it's worth it to go for that extra win condition.
Way to see it. Yeah, that's a really good way to see it, because that also adds the context I think players need to make that kind of decision.
Yeah. We've all done this in a draft before, where we're on pick like 22. It's just the absolute most disgusting deck you've ever drafted.
Oh, yeah.
And you have a choice between like making sure you have a solid 2-drop. It's just like a Blood from Raptor versus kind of a really good card, but like a more techie card, even something as good as Seal of Champions or Blessing of Kings. And you don't have enough 2s yet. And you're just saying, man, this deck is so good. Let's just make sure we don't lose because we are not able to drop something on 2. The Blessing of Kings is fantastic, but let's not take the Blessing of Kings because the rest of our deck will make up for this lack of Blessing of Kings. And on the flip side, a lot of times you're saying, my curve already sucks. I have 3 Thrallmar Farseers, and I just need this Kraken.
Biceps, though.
The Kraken's not going to save your deck then. I don't know what you think the Kraken is, but it is not the magic pill. But yeah, that's kind of the general point.
Yeah,
I think.
absolutely.
And you will eventually know, right? Like what your win percent is with each particular kind of deck, and it's personal. Part of it is how good you are. Part of it is how good you are with a particular class, with a particular archetype, with the particular cards that you have selected. And so this is one of those things, right? That Hearth Arena is not going to help you with. We're going to assume that you're the perfect player with all this, and so. This is a very personal kind of determination that you make, and it's one of those things where when people pick against Hearth Arena for the Kraken, when we were saying, the third one's fine in this like slowish whatever crappy deck, and you're like, oh no, and that's totally fine if you know why.
Actually say that. I want your face to be up there. It has the blurb of text. This deck is kind of crappy, so you should take the third Kraken here.
Oh man, coming 2016. Okay, so let's take. We're going to move on to the second half of our show. It's not really half. We got the big half over. And now, let's see. We are going to do a patron call. Oh, the patron call out, which is scheduled for the next day to talk about. For the first time, because we started our Patreon earlier in September, so we have just actually collected money from Patreon the first time. Thank you guys to everybody who fed the goat. We have an overwhelmingly high, like I've talked to people before setting this up, and our pledge to actually getting the money rate is insanely high. And just thank you guys so much for doing that. And we'll name some of the top patrons on the next Lightforge after we get the communications in. But yeah, just thanks to everybody. And if you're wondering what the patron is, it's a way to donate to us. Go to patreon.com, patreon.com/grinninggoat, and that's how you can support the Lightforge podcast and our other activities. And along with that, part of our other activities, not directly related to it, of course, is the Hearth Arena and the overlay, which we talked about a bit last time, and it's getting a little delayed. Like we said before, the programmer owner of Hearth Arena is doing this whole thing. We just do the algorithm behind it. So we are not like 100% sure what exactly the bugs are, but we've apparently found some bugs, and we want to get them all done before we release it. So now the target release date is October 12th. So look forward to that.
I'm still picking Dust Devils over Hexes, just to let you know, because I saw that and I'm like, this is a great idea.
Yeah. Now, let's move on to the question from the GOAT.
All right, question from the GOAT. And I'm really curious to see what you pick for this sim. Basically, if you could freeze time at any moment in the arena meta, all the way back from Classic to this point, and you could only play during that meta, what would you pick and why?
Okay, so if I could only freeze one moment in the arena meta, I mean, it would have to be right after I discovered TGT, before I felt like a lot of other people did.
When you have the edge.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I had the edge then, knowing what I knew then and knowing that other people didn't know what I did. Those kind of advantages you seek are the reason why you play arena, right? To always, because if everyone was perfect at the game, everyone would be 3-3, and that's no fun. So being able to have that edge, especially when you get it collaboratively, and you feel like some secret group that's getting ahead of everybody else, and you start to discover things, and it feels so good, that moment of discovery. Yeah, I'd say within the first 2 weeks of TGT at its release.
All right, that's fair. Let's see. What would I freeze? It's not GVG. I did not like that meta. That got a little too fast for me too. And I generally like things faster. Maybe the I'm torn, right? I think the BRM meta was most suitable for my play style. It was still fast enough, but it was also slow enough that you can. It was very powerful for mid range in the BRM meta. When you go start at a mid range, you flexibly go either a little faster or a little slower based on what your opponent's doing. And in TGT, it's a lot that's gotten a little less powerful, but I think it's a more fun meta because in the TGT meta. Your decks go everywhere. You see all kinds of like super aggro decks still, and they're successful. And then you see, like especially for hunters and rogues, right? And then you see all types of these like new attrition-y control card advantage decks that was barely even viable on this level in Classic, right? Classic was probably the last time that they were like at the top of their game, and it was good, but it wasn't like one of the top archetypes. And now it's kind of becoming one of the top archetypes again, where you just end up with this infinite card advantage loop that you can get with the Inspire minions or with the Krakens or whatever.
I think you guys also touched on this in a previous Lightforge podcast, where like in vanilla, like there was so little action early. There was no 1-drops. There was only one kind of 2-drop. There was 3-drops that didn't really have their own purpose because 2-drops consumed them for free anyways. Or you could just have 2-drops killing 3-drops, and it was just very very linear play style, very straightforward, very kind of mid-rangey. And now what you see with TGT, it's just so dynamic. You can just build these wonderful works of art that you never, you like this orchestra you didn't even think could play the same tune, right? Just like that Hunter deck. It's like, and even like the Warrior deck. I mean, we were starting off with the Warbot and the Wisp, and I was like, oh my God.
You were not behind that deck. I thought that was a decent deck.
No, I'm just kidding. No, but the thing was, because I was coming out of what I thought was a deck that I wish went a little bit better, I saw the Wisp, I saw the Warbot, I'm like, oh shit, man. But those were the right picks and for the right reasons, and they were better than the other cards. And I'm so happy it worked out. That worked, and that only like that kind of playstyle and in that kind of deck, it succeeds now in TGT. It's so beautiful.
Yeah,
and it succeeds more than it used to, which is, and I think it, like a lot of people, I think look at the meta and they think that it's stale because they see all these paladins, which is kind of true. Although statistically, paladins plus mages have been the same. It hasn't gotten better. It hasn't gotten worse. Your chances of seeing a paladin or mage has been the same since GVG started. And I'm not sure if it was better before that. We don't have stats for it, but that's just kind of how things are class-wise. But when it comes to the archetypes and the kinds of decks that you're facing, it's so much more variety now than there used to be. And not just because they added new cards, but because they made these new cards actually made different playstyles viable. I think interesting wise, I think we're at the most interesting point right now in the TGT meta. In terms of like where I would think I personally did better, I mean stats wise it's the same, but I feel like my improvement has been kind of like wiped away by the TGT meta, and I'm kind of like, I find myself adjusting to more like attrition is not the way I typically play, right? I recognize, I think I also recognize when you did that attrition was going to be, and I call this style attrition, which is that you can go really far into the late game without needing the normal like AoE kinds of like control spells, where you're just going to out card advantage them in the end because you've traded better, because your cards are bigger, because you have drawn more cards, whichever one of those, and because you protected your health adequately. And so I've recognized that in the beginning, and we programmed Hearth Arena to like really open up the floodgates on attrition decks. We made a bunch of attrition decks. It all worked out. But personally, when I'm like playing a deck, I still like that tempo mid-range kind of like deck to start with. And now I'm being like, I find myself being forced a little bit more into like classic control and attrition decks, just because I know that because I'm a flexible player and I know that those are strong. And when the decks go that way, which is going a lot more often now, that's the way you're going to get the best results in. So I like what I'm facing, but when it comes to me and my like OCD-ness of needing to like pick what I think is the best deck, it's forcing me to play a little off of where I would prefer to be playing. So I don't know. It's either BRM for comfort or TGT for excitement.
Yeah, I think one of the problems I have with TGT, so to answer this question, I would pick probably the BRM era. I would pick TGT, but for the fact that with the increased TGT offering rates, it really gives a I would say kind of an annoying advantage to some classes. Like, why is
Yeah.
Paladin so popular right now? It's not just because they have Murloc Knights and because they have Seal of Champions. It's because those cards are offered disproportionately at a higher rate.
Right.
If TGT were out and it was just more cards and the offering rate was the same,
And there's
I
like
think,
so much fewer of the cards we love, like Flame Strikes
Yeah.
and Swipes. And
Yeah.
no, like I say that like almost like I'm joking. I'm not. I love those cards. I want to see more of those cards. One of the things I really want to happen is that they raise the basic card offering rates along with whatever the last expansion is, just so the classes can keep their flavors.
Yeah, and I think it'd be cool if every once in a while they did offer one expansion pack a little bit higher than the others, like kind of as like a Tavern Brawl thing, right? Like this week, Nax cards and be offered at a 10% higher rate. Like that would be cool. That'd be refreshing.
Ooh,
That would
shaking
be
up
great
the
idea.
arena.
Wow.
that would challenge you as a player. How quickly can you adapt? And if you can't, well, it won't be around for long.
Right.
It may change next week. And it's finding ways to keep arena fresh between expansions. That could help.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
that's
totally.
a great idea because it introduces another skill, right? It's the skill that you picked up on at the beginning of TGT, and it introduces the skill that right now is just not being tested in the arena. And we're always trying to look for more ways to either make arena more rewarding or just to increase kind of the fun factor of it. And I think this could be something that really not only tests a new skill, but really spices things up, right? People might just want to play different classes as well. You go back to Classic and suddenly Warrior is not terrible anymore.
Warrior was so good in like you're talking about thinking that you have an edge over like what other people knew. That was me with Warrior in Classic. I had like a above 8.5 win per run rate with Warrior when everyone thought that it was like one of the worst classes, and because I just it was the tempo and going face with like the weapons and all that, and then Blizzard slowly but surely took all that away from me.
I feel like Warrior plays a lot more like Hunter than any other class.
Yes,
Especially
yes.
the weapon. I mean, you're doing 2 damage typically for every 1 mana, so you can. Well, I mean, even with the Ogre War Maul, right? It's what 2.5 damage per 1. I mean, you don't want
If it misses, you deal face. So what?
Yeah.
No.
Good choice.
Yep.
All right. Let's move on to card good bad, where we talk about a card and whether it is good or bad. And the card that Simcopter picked, we always let our guests pick the card, and this is a great one. I wish we would have thought about it. Was Volcanic Drake. So why don't you start us off, Sim? Volcanic Drake, good or bad?
Good. And the reason why I like the card is it's already it's a card that's good already with the classes that are good now, such as Rogue, Paladin, Mage, even I guess Druid to an extent. Classes that reward you trading on the board and establishing a monopoly in order to, end the game over the next few turns. Also, when you're playing against classes like Paladin, you want to clear their board every turn. So Volcanic Drake always has a way on if you have initiative. So it rewards classes that do board trades consistently. It punishes classes that need to get on the board but need also to be wiped so that your Drake can get out there quickly. And even if you pay like 6 mana for it, it's not that bad, right? Like, it could be that top deck card that you really need to win the game. At its worst, it's still not bad. At its best, it's a huge swing on the board. And you can also swap the stats maybe with a Crazed Alk or, whatever, the reversing switch, turn it to a 4/6. Now it's anti-flame strike. It's a good trading utensil. You have Dragon Synergy. And just the board swings that come with the card are so vital, especially when you need to find a way back on. You just don't have that many ways to swing the board anymore with the absence of AoE. That cards like Crazed Alchemist, cards like Volcanic Drake, they can be your way back on.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think one thing that bumped Volcanic Drake a little bit higher as well, that 4 health barrier is not as punishing anymore. It's still not great. Would you prefer 5 health? Yes. And you would also prefer 6 to 5 as well. But before, like previously in the meta, 4 health was a death sentence. Everything killed it. And still, Flame Strike does kill it, True Silver kills it, but the offering rate and the dilution of cards, it's not the huge disadvantage that it was previously. So, everything good about the Drake still exists. You want to trade, and especially now, a lot of times you're incentivized to trade. And that 4 health, which was so punishing before, it's a little bit less punishing now.
Yeah. I mean, every card has a downside. You can't just have every card in the game be a 4/4/5 or a 5/5/6. Every card has a downside, and that's a good thing. But the fact that the downside of the card is 4 health, it's not that bad for how swingy it is, for how well it rewards you for having initiative and trading well. You can trade out the entire board like you would with like maybe a Cult Master and deploy your Drake for free. Like it never even happened. So
yeah, like even at its like base of, I have a minion, I traded into your minion, both our minions die. Well, now you get a 4 mana 6/4, which is overstated for the normal 5/4 that you would get. Then that's a very common situation. So,
right.
And I really like what you said before about even at its worst as a top deck, right? It's a pretty big card. It's a 6/4. It's a good body when in a meta where the bodies on top deck start really mattering more and more. When you get into more and more top deck kind of situations with your opponent, this could really make a difference. And it's when the mana really doesn't matter. Because you could pay 10 mana for it and you'd be okay with it. It's just a 6/4 body, and that's above average.
Totally. And with classes like Rogue that have, a weapon that's totally common match, right? Rogue versus Paladin. You're always using your weapon to clear hero powers. So I would say more than like 80% of the time you're getting that card out for 5 mana or less. And it's probably even more often than that. So paying 6 mana in that matchup, or even like Pally versus Pally, the one who gains initiative, getting that Drake out, the other one's done. Like, it's just there's so many ways to swing the board. This is one of them, especially when you don't have many other swinging mechanisms in your deck. And also, I keep touching on this point, but it's so important, having initiative and being rewarded for having initiative. And once you finally get to the Drake, you're turning that in, and you're getting even more benefit than you should already be getting. So, very good card. Well, okay, pretty good card.
Pretty good card. Not like insanely good, but pretty good card.
Having this discussion, right?
Yeah. Better than a Raptor, certainly.
Yeah.
Okay. So finally, we're about to wrap this up, but let's talk about the class. We talk about one class every single week, and it's the class we're about to do an arena coupon with me and Merps. And this week, finally, we're back at the Paladin. We have not done a Paladin run in so long because we don't get to pick the classes anymore. It's done by this system. I'm not going to get into it, but we finally got Paladin. We're very happy because clearly Paladin is one of those classes that's on top of the meta right now. We like Rogue and Mage better, but Paladin is right up there. And I guess let's talk about why the Paladin is good and how it can be good. You want to start us off, Merps?
Sure.
How would you play it?
How would you play it? Draft 5 Murloc Knights.
Okay, besides doing that.
To get serious for a second, if you really want to delve into the strength of the Paladin, it's because a lot of their class cards synergize with neutral cards, which is so ridiculous. A lot of classes, their class cards only synergize with other class cards, or they synergize with a small segment of neutral cards. For example, you see Hunters, they have their class cards synergize with Beasts, which, they have their own Beasts and they have some class Beasts as well. But if you look at some Paladin cards, Argent Protector, Seal of Champions, Blessing of Kings, these are cards that synergize with every neutral creature that is out there. And with Paladins, they have ways to get on the board early, really annoying ways to stay on the board. And they have all these buffs that synergize with every single neutral card in the game. And I think that's really where the power comes from.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think the power it's just in the general flexibility, right? You do a lot of stuff. Your stuff can be done at any time. Doesn't really matter what your opponent plays. You either have the answer, in which you answer, or you don't, in which case you just drop a lot of stuff on the board, and you keep doing that, and your stuff is bigger and better than your opponent's stuff, and you're going to end up winning if you don't do something stupid, or if they don't do something really flipping the board ish on you. So there's that natural advantage that I see a lot. That's without like I don't think there's a sneaky good way to play paladin, right? Like you can get one thing I don't think people realize though is you can get very aggro with the paladin. It's a very good aggro class because although it doesn't have any reach, it keeps making these 1/1s that your opponent has to get rid of at some time, or the 1/1s keep dealing 1 damage every single turn. So if your opponent doesn't have a board clear, they're totally screwed. They're never going to clear your board. You're always going to get damage, and you can get out like 10 extra damage like that just by dropping more stuff, going face, putting out another dude. And so that's something maybe some people don't realize that is a very effective paladin strategy or backup plan, depending on how your match is going. But other than that, it's a pretty like you have cards and you play your cards kind of game.
Paladin's dynamic, it's flexible, and it doesn't really have to give up anything for that. That's what makes the class so strong. Yeah. I mean, with Shaman, you have to you have these kind of like understated spells because you have Overload, and you are now incentivized to get further value of that Overload because there are cards that match up with it, like Unbound Elemental, or the Overload is, well, I'd say the spells are understated for Overload, but the minions, they're good minions, but you need to have a curve that matches up for it. And if you cannot match up that curve perfectly with your Overload, you just miss turns and you totem and you lose all the advantage you could have had. Yep. And then, another thing is that they have this RNG that you don't always have control over, and that's not often rewarding enough. And then you go to Paladin, and it's like, they're better in almost every way. And, they can reliably draft weapons, they can reliably get buffs, they can reliably get minions on the board. They have a very small window where they're not that good, which would be between turns, I guess, 1 and 3, but muster for battle.
Now. It used to be 3. Yeah. Now they keep Blizzard keeps making that window smaller and smaller.
When you can look at a card like Light's Justice and say that's a good card, there's something wrong with Paladin, right? Like Light's Justice is like their way to monopolize the board by turn 2, and just like the way Shaman operates, the class, Paladin, when it gets a monopoly on the board, it wins. You can't get it off. I use this what would you call it? Comparison, I guess, between Paladin and like storming the beaches of Normandy. Like once they get on the beach, once the American troops get on the beach, once they get up the hill and up to the bunkers, you're done. You can't do anything about it. You've essentially lost the war there. But if you can keep them on the beach itself or in the water in the boats, you'll be okay. But how long can you do it for? How long can you do it for? There's no other class like it that's such a tick, that just gets under your skin and you just can't get them out. Dynamic, flexible, and strong in almost every way.
Yeah, I think we've all felt that before where turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, you've like cleared, but every single turn you have to give up a little bit more, and then every single turn it gives the Paladin options to drop something, and then finally on turn 5 it breaks, right? You can't clear their board, so you just like put stuff out there and you're like, okay, if you have something, if you have the Blessing of Kings, if you have the Argent Protector, I can't do anything about it, you play it, and then they play it and you lose. So you try so hard to deny them, but on, there's going to be one turn where you can't do it, and then that's your downfall.
Yep. Yeah. And a lot of it is through like no fault of your own. It's just like, oh, well, they just went 2 for 1 on turn 2 because they coined out, shielded mini and killed, or coined out a Bloodfen Raptor, traded my 2-drop with the Argent Protector, allowing to go 2 for 1, and now I lose. Like, okay.
Yep.
That's our relationship.
The only way, and this is how you know it's a powerful class, right? If you're against a paladin or a mage, your best job is to make them uncomfortable, and that's it. Like, make them play that 4 mana card on turn 5. Make them do it, right? Limit their value at all possible. Because it's going to come. They have these cards. You're not going to change that fact. So you just have to be as annoying as possible while, like, sneaking in the win by setting up whatever your win condition is, whether it's, like, to go face or to swing the board on one turn in some way or, like, get out that Sea Giant. Just something that you have to scheme.
Yes.
Scheme. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You have to scheme. And the paladin just has to do what the paladin does. So you're the one that has to kind of position the paladin into a position where they do what they do, and you still win, which is difficult.
We need a God scheme emote now with you kind of having it in your hands. touching each other close to your face and grinning downwards.
Yeah, well, that'll be spammed all over chat if it happens every time we face a paladin. Okay, well, that's... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that point about making your opponent uncomfortable and not do the things that they want to do. We talked about that with playing against Rogue. I think that was on... I think that was Win 12, where we were coining out like a micro machine. This is in our 12 on Hunter deck that we did the duo with. Coined out like the micro machine against our opponent's Worgen Infiltrator. I was like, dude, I don't know if this is the right move. And it's like, no, because what we're doing here is we're making the Rogue completely uncomfortable with what they need to do to clear the board, and they would just have to hero power there, and they wouldn't be able to do anything at all. And making your opponent uncomfortable and do plays that they weren't anticipating to do is a great way to get them to play off curve, a great way to play them, and they're kind of have them play on your terms, even if you're behind.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we'll end the Lightforge on that note. This was a great discussion. Definitely very happy to have you on, Sim. And,
yeah, happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, and anytime at all.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. We look forward to doing more Coops.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, so to wrap this up, what we're doing next week is going to be a little bit special. We're going to actually pre-record it because Merps is taking a vacation on the next weekend. So
well deserved.
Yeah. Thank you. And so we'll be recording on Wednesday night. It will not be recorded live. It'll be the first Lightforge not recorded live, and it will be released at the same time. So we'll be artificially delaying it by like 3 or 4 days before we release it. And the card good bad will be Wailing Soul, because it was Simcopter's second choice of a card he wanted to talk about, and we want to torture him by stealing it. It's a very good topic.
Yeah, I think Wailing Soul is a really fun card to talk about. There's a lot of unique things you can do, and you guys will have a great time with it.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you once again, Simcopter, everybody. You can find him at twitch.tv/Simcopter_1. Is that right?
It would be _1 for Twitter. For Twitch, it's just one.
Just word. One. Okay. Simcopter1 on Twitch, or Simcopter_1 on Twitter. And this is Adwicta.
This is Merps.
And this is Simcopter1.
And we will we'll see you on the next Lightforge.
Bye, guys. Have a good one.